we're going to finish off the work that we were doing on inflation. Diagrams in pencil, please, in future. So we're going to finish off the work that we were doing on inflation. We're going to go over the homework to clarify all those points about what happens during the boom and the recession. And then we're going to start into the work which will be the introduction to the work which I have left you to do on Tuesday. Okay? So let's carry on then from where we left off yesterday when we were looking at those points on the inflation diagram with regard to A, B, C and D. Now just, Scott, keep me right here if I've got these points in the wrong place. Is that pretty much what we looked like yesterday?
Yes.
I have a great memory there, Scott, haven't I?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Scott. Got inflation. And how's inflation measured again? Remind me, please. Nathan, how's inflation measured? Is it a percentage or what is it?
A percent.
Yes. Okay. So it's as a percent. And did we call these A, B, C and D, Scott?
Yes.
Okay. And I think we put some values onto these. Hannah, what values did we give them?
For E it was 10%.
A was 10%.
And for B 4%.
B was 4%. Okay. And then I asked our former colleague, Mr. T. Harrison, I said to him, what is happening to prices, Mr. T. Harrison, when we move from point A to point C? And he said, which many people say all the time. You listening? Which many people say all the time, when we go from A to B to C, they just think, oh, that's on a downwards trajectory, that must mean that prices are falling. But you're wise to that now, and you know that that's not the case. So, Mr. B. McGurk, tell me why, when we move from A to B to C, certainly from A to B anyway, Mr. B. McGurk, why are prices not falling?
It's because it's only like the growth rate of the prices that's falling.
Okay, so can you elaborate, expand upon that, please?
It's like the prices growing expensively, like that, like slowly.
Yes, what's your name, please?
Alex,
Alex?
is it because like it's increasing by 4% from the 10%? Like
Correct. Yes. So prices at A are increasing by 10%. So they're increasing by 10%. When you get to B, the automatic instinct for people who are not as clever as you is that they think, oh, well, that must mean that prices are falling. But actually, all the time that this is above zero, if inflation's above zero at any time, prices must be going up. It just means they're going up at 4% and not 10%. Now, here's a term for you, which some of you, and I wouldn't really expect you to get this in the homework anyway, we're only on lesson, what lesson are we on, Abigail? What lesson are we on? Excuse me? Favour, which lesson is this? 3?
4.
Excuse me, 3 last week, 1 yesterday.
5.
This is lesson 5, so I wouldn't necessarily expect you to know this in lesson 5. This movement, ladies and gentlemen, from A to B, when you've still got inflation, but it's a little bit lower, the term used to describe that, ladies and gents, is disinflation. So disinflation means prices are still rising, but at a slower rate. At a slower rate. And William, I'm just conscious of the time there for your piano lesson. Wouldn't want you to be late. You're a piano teacher. So A to B, disinflation. Now, can you see anywhere on that chart any time period where prices would actually be falling. Now we'll give Mr. B. McGurk a chance to redeem himself here. Mr. B. McGurk.
C.
Now this is double lesson, so you could probably leave that, I think. Sorry.
C.
C. And why do you say C, Mr. B. McGurk?
It's because C is actually below 0, which means prices will go down.
Okay, so what might that number be? What might that percentage be?
Like 2%.
2%? And any sign in front of it?
Minus 2%.
Okay, right, so minus 2%. Now, in that case, prices will be falling, and that's called, Hannah, do you remember what that's called? Some of you wrote about it on your homework, but you weren't actually describing it in the correct fashion. So that's known as,
I don't know.
name please,
Elliot.
Elliot.
Is it deflation?
That is known precisely, that is deflation. Now in that instance, prices would be falling. And indeed, ladies and gentlemen, I'm now going to shade all of that part red, there, this V section, because anywhere in that V section is below 0. So if you were at any point on that V, prices would be falling, because the inflation rate is always below 0. So you've got deflation. Now even if you move, let's say, from C to E, and that's going up, but it simply means that prices are not falling as fast. So rather than be falling at 2%, they might be falling, that might be 1%. To be falling at 1% rather than 2%. So this is a very, very common thing which is misinterpreted, especially by sixth form in multiple choice questions. So at this early stage, it's nice to get this out of the way and try and sort of stamp this bad practice out straight away. Is that okay, Sarah?
Yes.
Sorry?
Yes.
Yes?
It is.
Yes, it is, okay. Is that your full sentence there, Sarah? It's a full sentence there, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, prices are falling with deflation. Now, what then say you, Sean, to point D? What would you say is happening at point D? Prices would be rising. Okay. So we've got disinflation, prices rising at a slower rate. We've got deflation, prices are falling. And then obviously, as you move back into this section here, this hashed section here, so prices, if you're moving up there, then that would be obviously inflation again. Because prices are going to be growing at a faster and faster rate. So that's quite a straightforward graph, but there's a lot of technical nous and know-how in there. Okay, now, let's leave that now, ladies and gentlemen, to one side, and let's go through. I'm not going to spend a long time on this, maybe 10 minutes, just going over the homework with regard to the economic cycle. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've been doing the economic cycle and considering what happens to the 4 key macro objectives. And the 4 key macro objectives, of course, are, Glenn?
Stable prices, stability prices.
Okay, now we should have these committed to memory. Low and stable inflation is one. The next one is, Abby,
No unemployment.
low unemployment. John, the next one,
Sustainable economic.
sustainable growth. And the final one, Hannah,
A favorable
a
favorable trade.
favourable trade balance. Okay. And we said that we would look at those in the 2 parts of the economic cycle. Favour, one of them being, what were the 2 parts of the economic cycle we were considering, Favour?
Recession.
Recession was one, and the opposite?
Boom.
Booms. Booms and recessions, okay? And I'd given you this diagram, hadn't I?
Yeah.
So we've got time here, economic activity here. Boom and recession. Okay, so let's consider the boom phase first of all, and we'll just very quickly go over what we think would most likely be happening to the key macro objectives. Now, remember, what did we say was very important in your explanations? Mr. Ritchie, what's your first name, please? Dylan, what do we say is very important when we're explaining things to the chief examiner?
You need chains of reasoning.
You need chains of reasoning, and what do we mean by that? Because that's quite a large term, you know, chains of reasoning. Manisha, what do we mean by chains of reasoning?
Applying it to like everyday uses and giving reasons.
Reasons and links in your explanations, correct. Now, if your homework that you've got in front of you does not include sufficient chains of reasoning, then as we go through this at this point, you need to be putting them in. Because when I collect your books in again, which will be, I want you to leave them off for me on Tuesday, I will then be checking not only the work that you've got for homework on Tuesday, but I'll be going back and I'll be saying, right, has so-and-so been through this and developed these answers to include sufficient chains of reasoning? And if you haven't, then you'll get it back and you'll have to do it. So this is your opportunity and your chance to be doing that. So this needs to be done in green as we go through these, please, in your green dit pen work. Boom. And let's always be remembering from this point forward, now, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that this is the start of a long economics career for you people. I hope that this is you embarking upon a journey through GCSE, A-level, university study, Sean, as we've just studied, Edinburgh University, the 6th oldest UK university, and then on to great work in economics. And then I will be most delighted in 10 years' time to lift the phone and say, oh, hi Sean, any chance you could come back and talk to the Economic Society? And of course you'll say,
Yes, I can, Mr.
not a problem. No problem, Chico. No problemo. Right. So number one, unemployment. Now, we did that yesterday, so I don't really feel it's necessary for us to do that one. So, for the purposes of the viewers, Michaela, what did we say happens to unemployment using quote-unquote chains of reasoning? Would you like me to turn the camera around so it's facing you? No? Okay. Shy? Camera shy? They're all a bit camera shy. Don't know why. It's only a camera, Michaela. It's only a camera. It's amazing, isn't it? You put a camera in front of people, they just sort of freeze. You just got to learn to relax a bit more. Isn't that right, Favour?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Go on, Michaela.
Unemployment falls, but it can't go on 4%.
Well, not that it can't, but it
Like if
wouldn't be desirable. But that doesn't include the chains of reasoning that we talked about yesterday.
Consumers demand lots of goods.
Now speak up, please, so that this is audible.
In a boom,
In a boom, okay.
consumers demand lots of goods.
During a boom. Go on.
Firms require additional labour. Consequently, the rate of employment falls.
The rate of
Unemployment
falls, correct. So, using chains of reasoning. Yes, Sarah.
I had those points in my homework, but you said that you discussed the demand for goods and services more. But how would you do that?
So just to say that during a boom, what would you expect to happen to the demand for goods and services?
Increases.
It would increase, and as a consequence of that, you need more people to make those goods and services. Therefore, that increases the level of employment and lowers unemployment. So that's what I meant by that. Yes, do feel free, obviously, if there's anything I've written on your books which you don't understand, then do raise that. So thank you for that, Sarah. Sarah, thank you. And the other thing I meant to say was, if you've got that little symbol in your book, which I did certainly on somebody's book that I've just given back this morning, that means there's a word or words missing in the sentence, so it doesn't actually string together properly. So do fill in the blanks if necessary there. Okay. Next one then we will look at will be inflation. Now, has anyone ever watched that programme on the TV, and I watch it pretty much every day during the school holidays, Homes Under the Hammer? Is that not popular amongst 13, 14-year-olds? What age are you? 13. Is that not a popular show?
It's good.
Put your hand up, please. Hands up. Let's clear show of hands. 1, 2, 3. Sophie? Alright, get your hand, even if it's sometimes. 4, 5, 6, 7. Right, okay. 7. 7 people, okay. It's not as popular as I thought. Now, in that particular programme, what's the general gist of that? What happens in the programme? When people are buying the houses, where do they go to?
An auction.
They go to an auction. Okay, what happens in an auction?
People like bid certain amounts of money to buy something.
Okay, so you've got a guy on the microphone, and he's saying, you know, I give you this house here in Lovely, he'll start me for 100,000, 100,000, 110,000, 120,000, 125,000, and so it goes up and up and up. Now, why does the price of it go up and up and up? What's your name, please?
Adam.
Adam. 120,000, 125,000,
Does it go?
120, 130,000,
It's higher.
140, 150, go on.
People wanted it, so they're raising the price.
People, okay, could you substitute the word want for something else? Another word, a more economic
Bid
term.
for it.
Say that again.
Bid for it.
Mm.
Oh.
Mr. McGurk,
Desire.
close but not what we're after.
Had a higher demand for it.
Demand for it is higher, correct. So, if you think of an auction, the demand in an auction room is booming. There's so much demand, and when you've got lots of people demanding something, it just puts the price up and up and up. And the price actually, it rations the good, because eventually, you lot over here, you can't afford it. So it puts it out of your price range. And then it gets so expensive that you can't afford it, and then you can't afford it, and then there's just one person left who can afford it, and they end up getting it. So price actually it's a rationing device. You've probably never thought of price like that, but price is a rationing device. And as price goes up, it just puts some things out of people's reach. Now, in an economy, when the economy is booming, the same thing's happening. There's so much demand for things, goods and services, that prices just get forced up and up and up and up because of demand. So it's a good analogy that to think of an auction being like a booming economy when you've got lots and lots of demand for something. And the other thing is, how many houses are people bidding for? So if I'm the auctioneer, how many houses do I have on offer, John?
I'm not sure.
Well, if I'm saying, who? Sarah?
Not many.
Not many. Could we be more precise and specific?
I'm not sure. I thought it was because there weren't that many houses, so the prices.
Okay, so if you're bidding for in an auction, what were you going to say?
One house.
What exactly? One. So the other thing to think about is, well, how many goods are actually for sale? Well, when everyone's just clearing the shelves of things, then the number of items for sale just goes down and down and down. So if I were to say, I listened to somebody on the radio called Mike Parry. I'm sure you won't listen to him, but Mike Parry. Have you ever heard of the Beatles? The Beatles. Do you know who the Beatles are, Sean?
Yes, I do.
Who are they?
They're musicians from the 60s and 70s.
Okay. Are they on? Oh no, they're not on tour. Are they? That's the Rolling Stones are on tour at the moment. No, the Beatles. Do you like the Beatles? The music of the Beatles?
I used to, but I don't listen to them now.
Okay. Then they're your modern, sort of the modern day equivalent would be, who's the modern day equivalent of the Beatles, would you say? Yes?
ACDC,
AC/DC.
of course. Definitely.
I think they're a bit old, are they not, AC/DC? I mean,
Martin, that's like early 2000s as
what,
well.
Mr. McGurk?
I don't know this.
Who would be the modern day equivalent? Who are sort of modern pop stars these days? What's that bloke called who's just done St. James? Ted Sheeran, is it?
Ted Sheeran.
Ted Sheeran. Sorry? Yeah, Ted Sheeran. He's quite popular. Did anybody go to see Ted? Did anyone go to see Ted Sheeran at the weekend? No? Well, he's sort of, in the 60s and 70s, the Beatles would have been as popular as Ted Sheeran is nowadays. I believe his tickets were £80 each and he played to 180,000 people over the 3 days. So in ticket sales, that's 16 million on ticket sales alone. Unbelievable that, isn't it? Unbelievable that, Sophie, isn't it? I should have had my guitar out a bit more often when I was younger, I think. Anyway, inflation in a boom. So what we're going to say, what are we going to say? What are we going to say for inflation during a boom time? What happens to it, Mr. Ritchie?
There's a high demand for sales, which means...
Well, hang on, so that doesn't quite make sense. There's a high demand for sales. There's a high demand for goods and services. Okay?
This means that prices are constantly going up. Which means...
Hang on, Sean. Let's do this one step at a time. There's a high demand for goods and services. What would you say about the goods and services themselves? Because lots of people are buying them. So they're disappearing off the shelves, so they're becoming... How would you describe them? Somebody said sparse in their work. I can't remember who it was. But sparse isn't quite... Was it you? Okay. No names mentioned. Go on. What would you say? Goods and services are becoming... Not that word. But what was the other word that I wrote in its place?
Oh, scarce.
Scarce. Okay? So the goods and services are becoming scarce. And then consequently, so that you've got lots of demand, not enough goods and services, so we would say therefore the excess demand, causes prices to rise. Okay, now we're including in here obviously then chains of reasoning. We're not simply saying in a boom inflation rises. We're explaining a little bit about it. We're linking these things together. Yes?
What exactly does it mean by the excess demand?
So, in this, let's say this was an auction room and I'm selling a house and I've got one house to sell, but you all want it. So there's 30 of you demanding it, but I've only got one. Well, obviously there's too much demand. So excess demand means there are many, many, many more people demanding it than I can possibly supply because I've only got one house. Just that. Is that clear? Excuse me? Yes, okay. Grammar, very important. Okay. Thirdly, economic growth. Or to be more specific, I've left a word out deliberately, so if we remember, to be more specific, what do we call, what type of economic growth, please, Pitchfork? What's your first name? Julian? Josh. Okay, Josh. Jake?
Sustainable.
Sustainable, correct. Now it's interesting what's reading your homework on this, what some of you have done. So some of you have talked about, and it's not necessarily wrong, some of you have talked about the fact that as we produce things, we are hoovering up the world's natural, I don't know, maybe some of you are geographers in here, but we're hoovering up the world's natural resources. And at some point, those resources will run out. Now, Casey, is it?
Kate.
Excuse me?
Kate.
Kate. What are those natural resources, Kate?
Like coal and stuff.
Coal and stuff. Coal would be one. Could you give me another one?
Oil.
Oil. Okay, very good example. Oil. Is that it?
Yeah. Yes. Gas.
Gas. Now, we went to Nissan, the Nissan factory, not so long ago, and they're obviously developing, and Julian there will tell us, because he's got one, an electric vehicle. Yes?
Yeah.
Or no, is it you who's an electric vehicle? No, I'm thinking of somebody. I'm getting you confused with somebody else. Sorry. But why is all electric motor cars and motorcycles? Why is that all the rage at the moment?
Is it because there's like a tax because we're using up too much petrol? So people are trying to get like electric cars so they don't have to pay that tax that like Donald Trump put on.
Okay, wow, now we've covered quite a lot of things there. So taxes, Mr. D. Trump, and electric vehicles. So let's just break that down for a moment. So number one, the tax that you're talking about is the tax that we all pay on petrol and diesel that your parents pay, which is enormous. And it's enormously expensive to fill your car up at the moment, for those of you who drive. So that's the first point. The taxes with Mr. Trump, they're on trade, so they're slightly different to the taxes that we would be talking about this morning. And the electric vehicles, Nissan are developing those because they realise at some point we're going to run out of all of these natural resources. So we need some alternatives. And of course the alternatives are cleaner as well in some instances. But that's not really the sustainability issue we're talking about here. When we talk about sustainable growth here, we mean if there are 30 people demanding a new house, are we able to build 30 new houses? Now the problem is that when you're in a boom, what's happening to growth? Is it slow or is it fast? Go ahead, in a boom. It's very rapid. So you've got rapid economic growth. Now who do you need, Glenn, to build houses? What are houses made out of? So what do you need to make a house? You need a